Hello, it's Philip Taylor speaking from Richmond Green Chambers in London, and it's a real pleasure to look at a book today which I found fascinating, and no question about it at all. It's called Comic Art, Creativity and the Law, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. It's from Edward Elgar. I'll look at the book in a minute. What it's about though is comics, and we all probably remember, I certainly do, my childhood and all of the various comics I used to get and have a look at and love and cherish. And what Marc H Greenberg has come up with is this book here. It's part of the Elgar Law and Entrepreneurship titles, Edward Elgar being a family business, independent and producing quite often very interesting academic tomes, but this one is slightly different. It's not a big book, it's about 200 pages long. There's an index at the back, and as I say, do have a look at what the comments are actually in the on the back sheet of the book itself. It's a hardback, and then what you've got inside, you don't have as such paragraph numbering, but you do have, there's no paragraph, but you do actually have a lot of footnotes which justify a lot of the points being made, and they sort of link into all sorts of things. It's quite nice, you get some of the actual cartoons that are shown as well, which is rather good. And then what you've got at the front, if I just show the beginning bit of it, that is the series, that's the actual series on Elgar Law and Entrepreneurship. Then you've got the actual front page of this itself. Then you've got the contents page, you can see that. And then we go over, there's just a little bit there, and then there's some acknowledgements there, because obviously this is about copyright to a certain extent. There are primary sources listed of case law. Then you've got contributions from edited books, and various other things, obviously journals, law reviews, websites. Quite an interesting way that they've set this out right at the front. Then you've got newspapers, of course, because a lot of cartoons are in newspapers. Then you've got transcripts and legal briefs. Then we get into the introduction itself. It rather starts nicely. The comic art form, whose hallmark is the telling of stories via a combination of text, dialogue and graphic art, is a sequence usually of panels. And that's really started off to explain to you what this is really all about. I rather like this book, I must say. I thought it was an interesting book to look at. We've given it a title. Well, we've written a nice review of this, which is on the web and in the journals, and we start with a quote. "Hi Superman, I'm a lawyer," and we'll explain where that comes from in a minute. Exploring the relationship we are here between comic strip creativity and the law. And this is what we say, talk about an interesting project. This really quite riveting book from Edward Elgar explores a not very much explored area of law. That is the effect, for better or worse, of the law on creativity and the creative process. In this case, the specific form of creativity, even less explored, is that of comic art. Those of you who've not lived in North America for any length of time will need to be reminded, possibly, that comic art in the American context is the art of the comic strip. Cartoons and comics have been a part of American culture since the formation of this nation, says the author who's a professor of law, that's Marc Greenberg, and he has a passion for comics and has done so for all his life. And I think most people remember the comics. I certainly remember the ones I used to get, and I'm sure you do too, if you were allowed to have them. Some parents wouldn't let us have comics. Anyway, that's another story. Great swathes of comic strips, the funny papers, funny and non-funny, are indeed a feature much looked forward to of just about every Sunday newspaper in North America, and Greenberg points out nonetheless that comics have, especially in America, been a subject of controversy, censorship, legislation and litigation, viewed as a threat to society and incitement to, amongst other things, juvenile delinquency. Hence the point I made earlier that some people, when I was at school, the parents wouldn't let their children have comics. They thought they were a dangerous influence. So you see what the difficulties have been. But wait, America may be considered the land of the comic strip, but what we're really talking about here are the multi-billion-pound creative industries, which, because of its almost universal appeal and power to influence as well as entertain, transcends international boundaries, and the focus of the book is Anglo-US and European. Even though the author pays tribute to the popularity and creativity of the art form in other continents, the subject is so detailed that it warrants the publication probably of another book, bearing in mind Tintin is very much on the continent popular and still is. And of course, when you're dealing with a lot of dialects and different languages, the way you can communicate something is actually through the comic strip. That of course means you don't have any written text, just the pictures, but certainly that's something that happens. Take the old USSR, 98 different languages, got a bit of a problem there trying to explain basic things sometimes, so you see where the issues can sort of come in. So while the book could be considered here as a guide to the law of comics, it's more than that, we think. There is much analysis and commentary on the history, structure and modes of comic art, which after all leads the discussion into two legal doctrines. That's the law of contract and copyright law. The impact of tax and obscenity laws are also discussed in the book. Intellectual property rights, however, loom largest in our view for the oft put upon creators of this especially popular form of creative art. So there's always going to be this difficulty with intellectual property issues. To cite one example is the case of Peanuts and the creator Charles Schulz, and the creative and legal tussles that he experienced with the powerful United Features syndicate. Remember, they did Popeye, who were the distributors of his creative work. Another example, the not too comfortable legal problems of the creators of Superman. One academic paper on this subject is entitled "Hi Superman, I'm a Lawyer," hence the title, which was, we thought, rather amusing. Moving toward the final section of the book, however, the focus shifts beyond the borders of the United States towards international markets of comic art, particularly bande dessinée in continental Europe and manga in Japan, not to mention the borderless world of cyberspace, which is the sort of a new version of it, which concerns comic art digitally created and distributed online. And of course that's basically the future that we're looking at now. Let me conclude by saying that with its 10-page table of authorities and the extensive footnoting, the book is a carefully researched academic study as well as a fascinating read. And it's certainly something you can actually read cover to cover, and it's really fascinating. It's one of these not books you probably wouldn't put down because you'd find it interesting to go through in one session reading it. No doubt it will end up as an exceptionally well-thumbed volume in practitioners' libraries on both sides of the Atlantic, at least we would think so. And fans anywhere of cartoons and comics, we think, will love it. The publication date is cited at 2014, and I've been reviewing this in the summer of 2014, just to show you again. There's some interesting comments on the back of the book, which has been seen by various people. And just to open it up again, this is the obscenity law area, because of course there have been what you would describe as obscene cartoons, without mentioning the names, but there were some problems at one stage with, I think it was Fritz the Cat, I think it was called, which was particularly, actually totally gratuitously unnecessary, frankly, for the comic art, but however it sold a few copies of the film, I suppose. You've also got the neuroscience of creativity, which I thought was rather good, because what we're looking here at is creativity and how you've got an idea and you can actually, because it's your intellectual property, you've got to remember the safeguards and what you can and can't do. But I've loved this book. I thought it was a special one. So thank you to Marc Greenberg and to Edward Elgar for the courage in publishing it, and I think it should have a wider readership than just lawyers. I hope the people who are actually the creatives, and not the suits, but the actual creatives themselves, will buy this book. So thank you very much to all concerned. Do look at the review on the web and in the journals, and it's a good read. Bye bye.